Well, I'm here to present T3 in Collingwood, which is also a Wurundjeri Wurundjeri country, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. But what is T3? T3 is currently the tallest completed mass timber structure in Australia, and at the moment it's the equal highest, 8th highest mass timber structure in the world. That will no doubt change. There's an acceleration for construction, but it's an American developer. Our client is Hines. They've developed mass timber structures in the States, and we're very interested in a sustainable office building, which is about timber, transport and technology. That's their T3 philosophy. It's about 18,000 square metres of net lettable area, 184 bike parks. The site itself was a fairly nondescript warehouse on Wellington Street, corner of Wellington and Northumberland Street. But we were highly conscious, our site's in green, of the evolving landscape here in Collingwood with the GDO and a raft of completed and new buildings being applied for. So a state of flux. But we were highly cognizant of respecting the Collingwood identity and simple, singular, robust building. It's always been an industrial heartland. And so how could our building actually speak to this as we evolved our thinking? So the general moves were to recognise the footprint and try and maximise yield, which is what all developers try to do. But our big move at the ground plane was to set back the northern facade of the building to align with the heritage building behind us, and also create a wider apron, almost a carpet between ourselves and the Wardle commercial development to the north. Northumberland Street's a very narrow street, the creation of a civic concourse. The building's then broken into two halves, a podium that really speaks to the street level and the surrounding scale of buildings, and then the tower form, which, as we mentioned before, is engaging with these emerging atoms and emerging height of the building. The structural premise of the building really followed that logic, and so the podium is a concrete structure, while the top 10 levels are mass timber construction. And then both facades are wrapped with appropriate materials, brick for the podium and a curtain wall system for the upper levels with a series of fins on it. Looking at the broader site plan, we can see how we've slid the facade line back, creating a wider 4 metre wide footpath here, and also a reciprocal relationship between the entries into these commercial developments to the north. We had an idea to actually extend our brick paving all across Northumberland Street, but Council's Roads Division had real problems with that crazy idea, so it never happened. But end-of-trip facilities, bikes, are obviously a key part to the story, as are outward-facing tenancies. Typical commercial tenancy has got an 11 by 11 metre grid, and we come up and transition to our timber level, which is not level 1, and we have a 5.5 by 9 metre grid. Which is about optimum panel sizes. The form steps back as a function of urban design analysis and creating upper level terraces for the building and occupants as well. Looking at our western elevation, you can see how we've actually moved the facade back by 3 metres on Northumberland Street, creating this wider space. But then we managed to recantilever the upper forms back up to the property line, and our section then starts to tell the story of these two materials fundamentally making up the building. But timber is the main story. Hines are a developer really keen in pushing this. This project occurred over the journey of COVID, so a hell of a lot of moments where it wasn't maybe going to happen, but a lot of analysis. But sustainability was at the core of the journey. 6-star Green Star design, and we're about to get the as-built certification as well. 5.5-star NABERS energy rating, a curated design, shading the glass, obviously low carbon mass timber structure, rainwater collection from the roof for feeding the terraces and the irrigation of terraces, but also toilet flushing, and then really generous end-of-trip facilities as well. That's a bunch of things going on with the building. But coming back to timber, we were also able to source all of our timber locally. So the mass timber columns, glued columns and beams came from ash in Gippsland, while Xlam had the radiator palm softwood CLT panels and just a small metric, the 950 cubic metres of glue timber for the structure that regrows itself in 11 minutes. So this is a highly sustainable way to build if we're planting enough trees to outstrip our consumption. So the premise of the building, a timber frame on top of concrete, which results in a total reduction of 34% of CO2 emissions around around the structure of the building. A lot of that is in the fact that timber, as it's growing, is sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere, but even through transport and manufacturing, you get to a point where you're well below an even baseline compared to the generation of a standard building fabric. So an innovative way moving forwards. We explored multiple systems, multiple grid systems to optimise this and to come up with a system that worked not only from a sustainability point of view, but a cost point of view. Hybrid concrete and timber, steel and timber, all concrete structures. But we settled obviously on timber. And once we had that 9 by 5.5 metre grid, we did a bunch of test for fits to actually validate the layout opportunities for the site. And just an interesting shot during construction showing the differential in the 11 by 11 metre grid with the 9 by 6 metre grid, which you think is really tight, but it's actually not, and it feels fantastic. So timber floor 3.7 metres, a floating floor for data and power and cables, and also acoustic separation, and then a curtain wall facade. Timber buildings take an enormous amount of coordination, shop drawing, services integration, the provision of additional penetrations in beams to allow floor plates to be redesigned and refit out over time, and just really highly complex detailing around the junctions. It's also about optimising, efficiency on site. Floors went up on average 8.4 days versus 11 days for the concrete, so it's a very fast way to build. Huge amount of fire testing. Building at this height took a lot of proving up. The client spent $500,000 in 7 different fire tests to actually prove up the junctions and the detailing. It went up quickly, 87% reduction in terms of worksafe incidents on site, and a much healthier workforce. And onto the building itself, and we can see how it's all about being true to Collingwood. And we've used a singular colour block both for the podium and the upper level to unify and unite the building, much in the spirit of these fabulous Collingwood warehouses which are dotting the site. Coming down to the street level, we can see the facade of the heritage building and the engagement at the podium level with the street. Looking up in Northumberland Street between ourselves and the Wardle building to the north, and looking at some of the finer grain of the elements and the transition between stretcher bond to stack bond, the screening above and the engagement with the simple perforations in the facade. The lobby continues this industrial aesthetic. The brickwork runs through. It's tough, it's industrial, it's Collingwood, it's not Collins Street. And we wanted to maintain that rhetoric all the way through, and certainly into the end of trip changing facilities, which are rubberised floor and stainless steel everywhere. Pretty hardcore, but our client went for it, and we were thrilled. But it's all about these levels and coming out onto the timber levels, and this wonderful sense of biophilia you receive. There is a warmth and a softness to these levels that actually has to be experienced. The 5.5 metre grid versus the 9 metre grid. Looking through multiple studies about the optimal spacing of the shading fits on the facade, and looking at how these spaces can fit themselves out over time. Looking east, and this is really looking through this sequence of timber beams, and you just get this wonderful repetition of timber and warmth within the facade. The terrace on level 12, outdoor space, and then zooming back out to see the facade and trying to use a low tint on the glass so we can actually see as much of the timber as possible. Views really the future, I suppose, in Collingwood, looking back towards the past in terms of the CBD, or hopefully new ways forward. And then thinking about the building both by day and by night, and landing on the footpath with a building that positively and actively engages with its surrounds, but provides transformative new office spaces. That's it.